Hello all, and welcome back to a new episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season, we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode. Right now, we are reviewing Dune Prophecy, and today we are on episode 3, the halfway point, titled Sisterhood Above All. If you haven't watched this episode yet, this is your spoiler alert, so please check out the episode before continuing to listen to the rest of our conversation. Okay, Sarah, kick us off with an episode summary for this third episode.
Following a tragedy, young Tula worries about being accepted despite her family name, while a skeptical Valia struggles with the decision to take the sisterhood vow. Years later, Valia receives a message that confirms her suspicions, and Tula mourns a loss.
Okay. Wow. Lots of things happening. Oh my gosh. Each episode of this dang show feels like it's at least 2 to 3 in any other season of television. I just finished an episode and I'm like, man, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, there's so many characters and they're all doing different things. And it's like, wow, this is a lot to keep track of.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start off with our episode titles for episode 3. What is yours?
Mine is Fresh Start.
Oh, yeah. Our characters make some very fresh starts in this episode. My episode title is Crisis Survival Advancement.
Indeed. Yes.
Yep.
Yes, there's all of those things in this.
I'm pretty sure like all of human history can also be just summarized in those 3 words. It's pretty great. Wise words from Marcella.
That's a real succinct way to sum up the human experience.
Yeah, right? Really. Okay, well, let's dive right in. Lots to discuss. Tell me your thoughts about this third episode, because you were very excited and positive about the first one. Second one, that's okay, for you. How did this third one land with you?
Yeah, I'm still in the kind of okay realm. I do think that we're starting to pick up speed, but I feel like these first 3 episodes are really setting the stage and getting all of our players in the right positions and letting us know where allegiances lie and all of that. So it feels like a lot happens, but it still feels very, very like set up to me. And so I was like, okay, this is okay. But I feel like now we have all of our players, like now that, yeah, basically. So now that Lila has undergone, Dr. Frankenstein's transformation and she is becoming a spice monster, I think interesting things are going to happen. I hope in the next episode. And we can actually start to have things happening rather than I feel like the first 3 episodes are looking back a lot, and that's really helpful because it gives us context for what's going on and sheds light on what Valia and Tula are doing in the present. But I'm hoping in these next episodes we can be more like present thinking and see what people are doing in the moment rather than just constantly looking back. So I still think it's okay. I'm not like wowed by the show yet, but I think we have our pieces on the table and now we are ready to move forward and start to see things happen. So that's what I hope to see in the next episode. But I'm not having a bad time watching the show. I'm just still in like it's fine. I'm reserving judgment until we see something actually happen.
Yeah. And I think especially because we end on such a fun cliffhanger after the second episode, where Desmond has completely undermined Valia and there's this big hanging question in the air of like, what's Valia going to do? And I think this episode, when I look back on the season, I will thank the show for giving us this episode because I think it's going to really inform a lot of the decisions that present-day Valia is about to make next, which will be really fun. It's just not what I wanted. I wanted to stay in the present because there's so much drama brimming there that I'm like, oh my gosh, like I want to see Desmond, I want to see the Carinos, I want to see the Riquezes, I want to see the Valia have to react somehow, and now apparently how's Tula gonna also make some choices. And so I guess this episode is just not answering the questions that were burning in my mind, which is fine. And perhaps I will thank the show later when we get some really juicy stuff that happens. And like you're saying, this episode feels like more foundation laying, especially the revealing of new dimensions of Tula, and then a deeper understanding of Valia's kind of torn loyalties that she's wrestled with in the past, between loyalty to her family, the Harkonnen house, versus the Sisterhood. And I think it'll be fascinating to see the way that plays into maybe some of her skewed decision-making as she continues to figure out how to navigate the situation in the present. The biggest and most interesting thing that I think this episode does is really opens up Tula as a character. So this episode feels very character building focused and less plot driven. And I think that's just like an interesting choice coming after episode 2, which was incredibly plot driven and kind of had me, wanting and waiting to be satisfied in that. And I think I just have to wait a whole nother episode longer for perhaps episode 4, where we really will get to dive into that. So there's a little bit of like me huffing and puffing, being like, this is not what I wanted, but some interesting character building moments. So I guess I can't be too mad about that, because I think there's some really interesting things that are revealed in this episode that were different than I expected, and really makes the rest of the show exciting to see what a character like Tula will choose to do, because the depths of what she's capable of has now fully been shown and deepened and widened for me. So that's really fun. I love that.
Yeah, there's much more to Tula than meets the eye, and I really do appreciate that, because we start off, and Valia is such a strong character. Like, she dominates every conversation. She is just in your face, and she is in charge, and she is the leader. And Tula has a very different personality, and it's nice to see those other pieces of her, but it's also interesting to see just how far back Valia's kind of manipulation and control of Tula extends, So I think that was also interesting. And as Tula presumably starts to push back against Valia and do things that she thinks is right, that Valia doesn't think is right, I think understanding the nature of their relationship is going to make those relational breaks even more dramatic when they come, even with her bringing Lila back to life. Obviously, that is a breach of literally everything. But I would imagine as the episodes continue, Tula will continue to push back in ways that will probably be interesting.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the interesting themes of the show that seems to be beginning to be explored, is kind of the ways that our emotions and loyalties to individual people that we care deeply about are kind of in contention sometimes with what's best for the collective organization that is the Sisterhood. So we got to see Valia really wrestle with that, with feeling tied and connected to the death of her brother and wanting to avenge his death, and that personal connection that she had kind of getting in the way of her being able to fully commit to Sisterhood above all and make that vow. So she had to go back home and take care of some business before she could come back and really dedicate herself to the organization. And we're also seeing Tula wrestle with that. Like, she is breaching the trust that the Sisterhood has in her with the permissions that she's been given by choosing to bring Lila back to life in some way, and kind of her loyalties and connection and relationship and that love that she has for Lila blinding her and really informing her a lot of the choices that she's choosing to make to prioritize that over the system and the organization and the trust that is essential for that organization to run smoothly overall. So I think that dimension and that struggle that is very real for us as humans, I think, is being played with and explored in this episode, which I think is really, really exciting to see.
Yeah. Tula's loyalties have been to Valia for ever since they were young, and now there is someone else who divides that loyalty. Yeah. And so she has different priorities. So I am so interested to see where that piece of tension goes, because Valia is so used to being in control. And we talked about this a little bit in the last episode. And now she's experiencing these moments that are outside of her control. And when you like to be in control and then things start to go out of control, it can lead to some really intense feelings, which can lead to some really intense actions. And so I'm so interested to see what is going to come out of Valia now that things are going to spiral further and further out of her control.
Yeah, that'll be fascinating to see. And I think also seeing the way that all of these characters deal with loss of some kind and how they choose to channel that feeling of grief and pain into revenge, into action. I think it's another thing that we've gotten to see from both past young Valia, young Tula, and also present Tula, present Valia, and how they react to those large feelings that come with being hurt, being in pain, feeling loss. Like it brings out all of these different types of reactions, and I think we're really getting to learn how these characters are wired and who they really are when they're in those circumstances, and kind of the choices that they're willing to make, how quickly they are able to make them without hesitation or with hesitation. I think they're all very fascinating choices that are being explored in this episode as well.
Yeah. The sisters in particular are just complete opposites. So it's interesting to see how they channel those things, how they channel their grief into their actions. And yeah, what great foils for one another that we see in this episode.
Yeah. Okay. What are some other big things, big events, big character moments that was exciting for you to see?
Yeah, I think this bit about Valia discovering the voice is kind of fascinating, because the first time that we saw her use it was within the Sisterhood, so I just assumed that was something that she was taught, or her Raquella taught her that or something. But we learn that she actually had the voice before that and was able to use that to save her brother. And so I think that that's a really interesting piece of this, that the use of the voice wasn't a tool in the Sisterhood's arsenal yet. And that is something that presumably Valia introduced and was able to teach people how to use. So I just really appreciated that little bit of world building and showing that, we don't know exactly where the voice came from, but we know that it came out in moments of distress or, those moments of survival. And I think that that's a really interesting way to think about it. So we're seeing this Dune world expanding further because Desmond got all these powers from the spice, and now we learn that Valia had the voice already before she entered into her training. And so things are a little bit more mysterious in this world than I maybe initially thought. And I appreciate that. So I'm curious to see what other powers or skills people have outside of the Ben Gesserit, because there's more out there than we've seen.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't think about Valia being the source of the voice, but yeah, there does seem to be this fascination that Raquella has with the fact that Valia is able to use the voice. So that I hadn't come to that conclusion yet, but I think that is a pretty deft read of her bringing that to the sister, and that's why Raquella has identified her to potentially be one of her successors and kind of that symbol of power. What was also interesting to me about that backstory of where the voice came from is that it was initially used as an act of love, an act of protection for someone that she cared for. I feel like so many times that I've seen of the Dune IP and canon, the voice has been used as a system of control and to kind of order the people that you need to do a certain action or comply with you. It's kind of a control technique. And I just didn't think about that idea that the voice potentially originally was used as in its purest form, when it's not been used and manipulated by human beings to do and get what they want. It was used out of protection and love for Valia's brother. And that seems really fascinating to me, in a really like pure kind of like in its essence, that voice was meant for something different than perhaps we've commonly seen it be used in the Dune world. So I think that was like another interesting little detail that's thrown in there too, of like, where I've always seen this is people ordering people to do stuff, and in actuality, maybe its purest form is come and manifest in a very different context.
So you're saying that using something to protect power at all costs might corrupt that thing?
You know? Yeah, we went from like helping save our brother to just like murdering people. So we corrected that thing real fast. I think the second time she ever uses the voice is for her to potentially take her mom out, you know? So talk about a fast turnaround there.
Yeah, I was like, chick, are you seriously going to make your mom stab herself in the neck in front of all of these witnesses? Like, what are we doing?
And then I love that her like older uncle goes, sorceress. I'm like, yeah, that would be terrifying and alarming if you've never seen that before.
I think even if you have seen that before, it would still be terrifying. This is not a power that someone should have.
Nope. No. Yeah. Really fun. One of the things that I really love about the show so far, and I hope that they explore it more, is this concept of the Atreides Harkonnen beef that goes deep into their family history, but this other perspective and narrative around how the Atreides came to power and how the Harkonnen came to power. The version that I think from the kind of primary core Dune canon is obviously our loyalties and connection points is through the Atreides family. So to us, they are our protagonist, and the Harkonnen are portrayed to be the villains in a lot of cases. Maybe they eventually become to be the villains. But I love that the show is kind of playing with that idea and flipping the perspective to showcase that there's potentially more to the truth than we even realized as consumers of the stories within Dune. You know, this idea that the Atreides have lied about the narrative, have dragged the Harkonnen name through the mud, have killed members of the Harkonnen family to gain power. It's a very different narrative than we get from the like wise and honorable Duke Leto of the Atreides house and Paul Atreides. I think there's a really great perspective shifting that's happening. And I love the way that kind of allows our minds to be really flexible around where our loyalties are. And the fact that the original versions of the truth and the connections we have with characters may be only a partial view. And I think that's like a really healthy just exercise for us to do as humans, to shift perspective and step in the other shoes and consider that there might be more possibilities than just the one that we've received first. And it's just fascinating to think about the way that that can translate out into our lives and our relationships in our lives. If like my narrative of what happened within a relational conflict is different from another person's perspective. So my ability to take off my view and put on the other's view and really understand, okay, if they believed a different set of facts, yeah, I can understand why they're upset and why there's cause for conflict here. I think it's just really healthy. So the power of kind of storytelling and different character loyalties to allow for that mental exercise and that heart exercise for us, I think is really fascinating. And I love the way that the show is playing with that concept of, are the Atreides the protagonists? Are the Harkonnens the villains? And why do you think that? It's because you've been told that from the original stories, and here's another story to be told here.
I love that you have such a positive and wholesome perspective of that. Because I love that you're making this point, which is very much there, and I love it, and I think that that's so valuable and so good. But I love that Valia took that and went in the exact wrong direction with it. You know, she's the one that's constantly like, the Atreides lied. And instead of being like, man, I'm going to use this to grow in my empathy and able to listen and learn from others. She's just like, nah, we're just going to kill them all. Burn it all down. I'm done. And it's just so funny because she has not learned the lesson that the show is really inviting us to think about. So I guess the moral of the story is don't be like Valia.
Yeah, and she is like galvanizing her family as well. You know, I love at some point she goes, this complacency is a disease. And I'm like, you know, like if your beliefs are incredibly passionate, but your methods and your approach is perhaps very misguided. But the desire and the feelings you have are valid. It's just channeled in a really wonky direction.
Yeah, very wonky. So wonky. Let's not like murder a whole family because they murdered a member of your family.
Okay,
Talia,
we have to talk about
things
Tula.
Differently.
We've got to talk about Tula. I love this for her. I know that it's not great for her as a character's like moral standing within the universe of what we believe to be right and wrong, but I just love that she has been so, you know, undermined, pushed to the side, kind of underestimated by everyone in her family, even her own sister, throughout her entire life. And she has so much more conviction and boldness and audacity than anyone's ever given her credit for. And I love me an underdog. I love this like playing with expectations around what strength and power and influence traditionally looks like. But like, let's not be sleeping on the Tulas of the world because they have so much within them as well that when channeled rightly is capable of greatness. Now she's channeled in a very wrong direction, but I kind of love just how much our understanding of what this character is capable of is expanding. That's really fun.
Yeah, we see a whole new side of Tula here. She is a silent assassin, and I'm here for it. I love it. I want to see silent assassin Tula just coming back. I do think one of the things that I wish the show had done, because I was really excited for Tula to take everybody out. I was like, okay, this is interesting for this character. And then it turns out that it was kind of Valia who was kind of manipulating her or telling her to go do it. And like Tula was like, no, I wanted to do it. I made this choice. But I kind of wanted Tula to make the decision for herself, you know, that you would have. I kind of wanted this like Valia is coming at it from this like really like loud and in your face perspective, and then Tula is just of her own accord going about it this very like quiet, covert way. And like I almost wish that like Valia hadn't known about it and that Tula had just done it on her own. I think that would have been really interesting for that character, but that probably wouldn't have served the larger narrative as well, because I think having Tula do these things while also being under Valia's control will make her potential freedom from that control more interesting. So Valia and her influence over her siblings, I think, sets the stage for where the show is going, even though I really wanted to just see deadly assassin Tula just taking people out just willy-nilly of her own accord.
Me too. I was slightly disappointed when we got back and there was kind of the reveal of like, oh man, like, you know, Valia has been scheming behind this the whole time, but it does show that she has the conviction and the capacity for more. And then I think it adds more weight to that final moment of the episode where Tula's really making some choices fully secretly on her own that is undermining Valia's power. So like the fact that she is capable and can now break out of that sphere of influence is really exciting to see. So you're right. We don't get the full rebellion and breaking free in their younger years, but perhaps we're seeing it now.
Heck yeah, 30 years later, let's go.
Yep.
Let's rebel. I'm here for it.
Yeah. Okay, other big things that we wanted to mention about this episode.
I think her relationship with Valia is kind of interesting. And that part where she calls them both together and tells them to like undergo the agony with a whole audience. Like, wow. But I found it so fascinating how she set the stage for all of that, and being like, you two are both the future of this sisterhood. And she didn't choose Valia or Dorothea over the other, but she chose both of them. And I'm just so curious, what did Dorothea have that maybe could be a counterbalance to Valia? You know, what did Raquel see in her that she was like, these two together will be powerful and be able to rule it all, not one or the other, but both. And so that just got my mind kind of going about like, what could the sisterhood have become had Valia not murdered Dorothea? Like, if those two had actually learned to work together and see each other's strengths, what could have come from this sisterhood as opposed to what we have here?
Yeah. It's kind of eerie to watch that sequence knowing what happens later, you know, of this faith that seemingly Raquel has for this ideally beautifully balanced view of power, and kind of them being able to also check each other too, you know, which I feel like we started to see before Valia murdered Dorothea. There was that healthy reeling in and pulling back in the right ways to ensure that their strengths are able to run free and operate, but also their blind spots, their tendencies, some of the things that their instincts that were potentially misguided are able to check each other. And we see that really the way that Valia is kind of unafraid to step outside of the bounds of what's okay really just took over entirely. So I think it's eerie to watch that sequence, knowing that ultimately Valia's kind of ruthlessness really just overtakes the whole thing, because what we've understood about Dorothea is that there is a moral compass there, and she's not willing to play dirty with Valia. And so, you know, she's gonna get taken out later on. And so I think that's fascinating as well to see. The other interesting thing about that sequence is that Raquel seemed to have an inkling or expect that Valia was not going to go through with the agony ceremony as well. You know, because when Valia comes in later into her office and says like, hey, I couldn't do it, Raquel is like, yeah, I knew. I knew that. And so it's almost like Raquel was using this ceremony as a way to reveal, like, you've got some unfinished business, go take care of it, and you figure your shit out, come back when you're ready. And I think that was a fascinating way that Raquel has used this pomp and circumstance, this ceremony, applying a little bit of that pressure to reveal what she needs for Valia to be fully ready to transform into the Reverend Mother, go through that process and fully commit.
And I was just a little surprised that Valia knew that she wasn't ready. I don't know. Like, I kind of expected that she would just be like, yeah, let's go. I'm ready. I'm not going to let anybody see me like fail, or not let anybody see my weakness. And so I was just really impressed that she actually stepped aside and was like, yeah, no, let me go handle my business. Which I also find really interesting, that she is so hesitant to leave her family behind and maybe it's more that she's hesitant to leave her name behind.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't get along with her family. Like, her brother was the only one that she really got along with. And like, Tula is chill, but Tula listens to her. So like, that makes sense. But it's that Harkonnen name and that identity and that grievance that we were just talking about, that she needed to let go of to become, you know, the Reverend Mother. And what's so interesting then is how this episode ends, of her going back to family and going back to the House Harkonnen and seeing where her allegiances really lie, and bringing back to life maybe some of those things that had grown dormant in her, and she had to let, lie fallow for a little bit, and now maybe it's the time for her to see if she can merge these two parts of her identity. Can she be a Harkonnen and be the Reverend Mother? And it's going to be interesting to see how she kind of plays with those two things that presumably can't coexist with each other at the same time.
And I think that's the other interesting thing, is that timing-wise, this choice for the episode to focus so much on that inner turmoil for her throughout all of these years around her identity as a Harkonnen and then her identity as a Reverend Mother feels like it's setting up for that struggle or that tension to play a role in the upcoming decisions that she's going to make in the present. Like, why introduce that concept without, building on top of that or exploring that further? Introduce some other dimension of how she's wired that is going to influence plot later. So I'm fascinated to see if that continued tension and loyalty and how that will then inform her decision making will come to pass in the present, as she's now faced with kind of these dire circumstances where her power is being threatened and the sisterhood is at stake. And where are her loyalties now? And what will she leverage perhaps from her Harkonnen past that might be useful to her as well? Like, we don't know. She seems to be going back for something and needing something from home. So I think that'll be really fun to see.
Yeah. What other powers do you got floating around in there? What other superpowers are we going to see in this show?
Exactly. Okay. Any other last big things we want to mention before we give out some awards?
Oh, there was just an interesting piece in one of the flashback scenes, Raquella and young Valia are talking to each other, and essentially Valia distills that there's an arms race going on, but it's for truthsayers. And I found that to be really, really interesting, especially given what we saw in the first episode, where Mark Strong's character, Carino, right? Is that his name?
Yep. Carino.
He was doubting himself after Kasha left. And you can see how, 30 years ago, a truthsayer was a nice thing to have, and everybody was clamoring for one. But we see how in these 30 years, the truthsayers are this like strong pillar, and these leaders rely on them so heavily. So it's not just, it's a nice thing to have, but these truthsayers are absolutely vital. And I'm so curious, under Valia's tenure, how did the reliance on the truthsayer change over time? Did she have that conversation with Raquella and go, hey, I can make this better and I can exploit this for our own gain? And then it became the system that it is today. So that line that she says about it being an arms race, and how she was able to distill what Raquella was saying into that succinct of a point, I found really interesting in just how Valia's brain works and how she's maybe thinking about these things. It's not just about, providing wisdom and insight to these leaders, but truthsayers are a valuable resource that they are providing, and that comes with a lot of power.
And you see that Raquella is so pleased that she gets it immediately. Same thing with the DNA too, She seems to think so clearly aligned to the way that Raquella thinks. And I think, if you're Raquella, you're like, this is exciting. Like, I found someone who's wired so similarly to me, and man, there's something here. There's a spark, there's a connection that's immediately formed between the two of them that I thought the show did a great job of showing kind of the chemistry between the two of them.
Yeah, BFFs. Right away.
Truly, yeah. Okay, let's give out some TVNS awards. The first category is for Best Sis. Who is getting this award this week?
I want to give it to Sister Jen for calling Tula out.
Yo.
She went so hard, and I loved it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've seen kind of like a harder exterior of that character for most of the show so far. And so to see this really emotional side of her and also kind of the fearlessness of her is really exciting. Every system, every organization needs the Jens of the world. Okay, my choice for best sis is young Tula. I mean, Homegirl's got some convictions and I love it. She's taken her revenge and, for the character's morality, not great. As a viewer watching this character that's been underestimated time and time again, I'm like, I am eating this up. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Let's go. Yep. I am here for Assassin Tula. It's the best.
Yep. Okay, the next category is for spiciest moment. What is your choice?
I want to give it to Tula's Dr. Frankenstein moment.
Right after she drinks her spiced tea.
Yeah, and she's using spice to bring Lila back. We got all kinds of spiciness happening.
Yeah, the clarity of mind that apparently she had to make this choice really coming through.
Yeah, it's all about that spice.
Yeah. My choice for spiciest moment is after young Tula murders literally the entire Atreides family, she chooses to let the young boy go. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, homegirl, 101 of taking out entire family lines is not a single soul can be spared. You got to take everybody out, okay? This is how revenge plots happen 20, 30 years later when that little boy is a whole grown man. He's going to come after you. So I just questioned her. She needed a little spiced tea before that moment,
She did. Yeah, she has not watched enough gangster movies, I guess. Leave no witnesses, ma'am. Mm-hmm. I get that you're trying to be kind. He's a kid, yada yada. But and I wish that there had been I wish that they had done a little something with that. Now I don't know, the cops of the Imperium, does the Imperium have FBI? I don't know. But they're the space cops are out looking for Tula, and so she has to flee. And so
she flees to the Sisterhood. Yeah.
To become a sister. It's like you go into hiding after you commit a murder, as we've learned from the mob movies. But no, it's fine. So.
Well, I wonder if that boy is the Swordmaster Atreides in the Carino house right now, was my thought.
Yeah, I had that thought too, but he's too young, right?
Yeah, they don't look alike either.
Yeah, that's true. Because the boy was, I don't know, 11, 12 maybe?
Yeah.
So he would be almost in his 40s by now.
Yeah.
And that kid, the Atreides Swordmaster kid, is not in his 40s.
No, he's 22.
Either that, if he is in his 40s, he has a great skincare routine.
Okay, so maybe it's his father. Maybe there's got to be connection points somehow.
There has to be.
Yeah.
Yes. Agreed.
That little boy is looking like a little baby Timothy Chalamet, though, for sure. So, hello to your lookalike. Okay. Next category is for most cutting line. What is your choice?
I want to give this to Valia's mom when she says, she's a wolf, and if you're not careful, she'll devour you.
It's so bad. It's so rough.
I love it, though.
Man.
I'm she was speaking truth.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But also it hurts when it comes from your mama. Yeah. And we do get to see the softer sides of Valia. It hurts her. She has to ask her brother, man, do you believe that too? Because dang, that cut deep. My choice for this is young Valia to young Tula. After Tula's informing her that all the Atreides are dead, she goes, I didn't think you could. All right. Thanks for believing in me, sis.
You wrong.
Gosh. Yeah. Here's showing you.
Valia is she's so hardcore. Oh my gosh. She would stress me out in real life and be like, I need you in small doses. Please go away.
Yeah. Okay. Looking ahead, what are you excited to see in episode 4? We are on the second half of the show now.
Yeah, I want to see Lila as Frankenstein's spice monster and see like what comes of that.
Oh no.
Because so like the whole like prophecy thing, Lila qualifies for that once she's brought back. And so I'm just interested to see what havoc she will wreak that they are not prepared for. And especially as like Valia is focused on Desmond, now we got Lila coming that she doesn't know about. What just madness is going to be invited in. And then what does that look like? Yeah. Desmond and Lila, is there going to be some like interaction there? Will they be aligned? Will they be against each other? What's going on? Is it like enemy of my enemy is my friend business? Like what are we going on? So I am most interested in what they are teeing up with Lila and what she could potentially do for the rest of the show and how she could affect all of the other characters in this show.
Yeah, everything, honestly. And we've seen so many of the characters and kind of history from the show so far around this high sensitivity around thinking machines and all of that kind of stuff, and kind of using the aid of technology in ways that are not sanctioned. And so how will this maybe sow mistrust within the great houses of the Bene Gesserit if word of that gets out, so there's just a lot of problems that could that could unfurl here.
Yeah. She has the potential to be an agent of chaos, and I'm here for this.
Yeah. And then there's the relational dynamic between Tula and Valia finding out and being upset. All that goodness. Yeah.
Yep.
Be interesting.
We got some stuff a-brewing here.
Yeah. We have a lot indeed. Okay. I'm looking forward to see more of Desmond. I'm excited to see present day Valia and what she's up to. I love seeing characters that seemingly are invincible finally have to face their limitations, and when they're pressed up against the wall, what choices do they make and how do they choose to move? I think that's so interesting, and I'm so curious to see how Valia, who is so intelligent and crafty and strategic, how is she going to maneuver her way around the situation that seems immovable, So I'm just excited to see that. I think that'll be really, really fun.
Yes, more Desmond, please.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
Indeed. Cool. Okay, well, this was our review and discussion of Dune Prophecy, Episode 3. You can find it available on Max. Thank you for listening to today's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today as we continued our journey through Dune Prophecy. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review letting us know your thoughts about Episode 3. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at TVNSPod, or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back soon to discuss Episode 4 of this show. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again very soon.